Hello, welcome back to my haunted library. It's Regina. So I'm dressed in mourning today in honor of Queen Elizabeth, whose funeral happened this morning. I caught some of it on TV and I found it very beautiful and very moving. And I feel like in this outfit, I could have slipped right into Westminster Abbey and no one would know the difference. I tried to look a little bit like Kate, but I'm probably ending up looking a little bit like Camilla. So I always tune into a royal wedding or a royal funeral, and this is the biggest. So, yes, but speaking of royalty, I have been enjoying this House of Dragon show like you would not believe. If you're watching the show, please comment below. And if you're not watching the show yet, or maybe you don't have HBO, but do try to watch it. If you were a Game of Thrones fan or you just love good fantasy, it's incredible. So when I started watching House of the Dragon, I was like, I hope it's not bad. It was great, and it just keeps getting better. We're kind of locked within this one royal family, and then the other houses are on the periphery. We do see their points of view in some scenes, but it's not like it's taking up an entire episode. But that could change. But I like how contained it is. So if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, I highly recommend you check out House of the Dragon. You probably already are, but if you just love great television, also check it out. It's excellent on every level. I mean, it's beautifully produced, great acting, great writing, which is what it's all about. You know, it's like, I'm so impressed with this show. I love it, and I just hope it just keeps getting better. And speaking of excellence, I have read a couple really good books recently for my Vamptember. For the month of September, I've decided to read nothing but vampire books. Also in honor of my book, Code Red, which came out and is, I'll have a few more words about that in a bit. But I wanted to cover two of these books that I read for Vamptember, and these are happy surprises. So let's take a look. So I mentioned in my last video that I got a bit of a vampire haul, and I got some Dark Shadows comic books. So I read the first issue, and it's great. It's all about Dr. Hoffman and her relationship with Barnabas, and that is just my favorite storyline in Dark Shadows. So I'll keep reading those, and maybe I'll do cover that when I finish the first. I think I have the first 7 issues. Then I found this book. This was one of those books I was just so happy to find in a Goodwill for $2. And this is called Draculas Air. And it is an interactive book from Quirk Books publisher, which I believe is close to me in Philadelphia. And, you know, maybe I'll just, I don't know, apply for a job there or something. Say, hey, I love your work. Pay me to read your books. It's text plus little letters and newspapers. Oh, I sat down on my couch one afternoon and just devoured this. It also has great illustrations. This is a book that kind of takes off on Dracula. Oh, and here's a chapter from Dracula, or it's like a missing chapter. I'm not really sure if this, I was reading this and I'm like, is this in the book? I don't know. It seemed familiar, but now I have to go back and read. Well, I actually started reading Dracula again, which I'll talk about, but it has wonderful, like these pen and ink style illustrations. So this story proposes the idea that Jonathan Harker is a vampire and that Mina's covering up for him, or maybe she's also a vampire. And that's the mystery to be solved. And then each little section has clues. When I bought this at the Goodwill, this was already sealed at the end. It's like the postscript is inside here, so I had to open this up. So this was a real treat to find in a Goodwill for $2, and I absolutely loved it. It really added to my love of Dracula. It reinterpreted the story a little bit, but in a really cool way. And speaking of Dracula, this is one of the best books I've read in a long time. It's called In Search of Dracula, A True History of Dracula and Vampire Legends by Raymond T. McNally and Radu Florescu. Florescu, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right. They are the gentlemen on the back. And says Raymond T. McNally specialized in Russian history, and the other guy was born in Bucharest and is descended from a Boyar family tracing back to the time of Prince Dracula. So both of them are bringing their knowledge, their deep knowledge of history and this part of the world, which still seems very mysterious. This was published in 1972, so in the late 60s, I'm guessing, when they first started on this journey, they followed Jonathan Harker's journey through the Carpathian Mountains. Here's an old map of that area. It has great photographs and illustrations in this, and a lot of really old illustrations and paintings that are now lost. The Borgo Pass, which is mentioned in Dracula. So they really tried to go to these places that inspired Bram Stoker, and also to the British Museum, which was a source for Dracula. Bram Stoker visited there and used different texts and things that were found in the British Museum and artwork that inspired Dracula, including a pamphlet describing the horrors of Vlad the Impaler. It gets into all of that stuff with Vlad, and as I'm reading this, I noticed that the beginning of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the movie, the Coppola film, which I love that beginning that takes place in Transylvania with Vlad, all of that voiceover and all that narration in the beginning, including shooting the arrow into the castle, although it's a little different in reality, but someone did shoot an arrow into the castle that caused Dracula's wife, one of his wives, I think it was the second wife, maybe the first, to throw herself out of the castle because she didn't want to be captured or killed by the Turks, and Dracula escapes. He gets out through a secret passage, but she doesn't. So it doesn't have quite the romance as the Coppola film, but that was also based on fact. So all of these are historians, so they're looking at the facts of the whole Dracula family. The Order of the Dragon was a real thing. There were a couple different Vlads, Vlad 1, Vlad 2, and then I think there's Vlad 3. And the family tree is listed in here too. So it gets into like the family tree, starting with Vlad II, who was Dracul, the devil. He was part of this Order of the Dragon, which was a crusade to protect that part of Eastern Europe against the Turks. They were fighting for Christendom by impaling people and setting them on fire alive and all kinds of crazy stuff. So Vlad II, Dracul, and then there was Dracula, his son, Vlad, and it's pronounced, when they have the pronunciation but you still can't pronounce it? Sepish, the Impaler. And he lived from 1431 to 1476, and it's a lot about his life. And then he has a son called the Little Impaler and Mihail the Bad, all kinds of crazy stuff. And he's also connected with Countess Bathory, the Blood Countess. There is a connection with them too. So it really covers all the incredible myths and legends about Dracula, and then seeks to find the real evidence, including all the castles, Dracula's grave. Here is the woodcutting that Bram Stoker probably looked at in the British Museum. This, I think, was from the pamphlet where it depicted how Dracula impaled all of his enemies on pikes, and it gets into detail about how that's actually done by pulling someone between two horses, and then you can kind of imagine where the stick goes. It could go through other places too, but it was pretty horrifying to even imagine it. But he was having his banquet, and all of the bodies of his enemies were up on the pikes, and one of his henchmen had the gall to complain about the stench from the rotting bodies. So Vlad was like, okay, well, you're next, and impaled him, but we'll just put you a little higher so you don't smell it. This guy was cold, so cold. I got chills reading this book because it's real, It was fascinating, and I'm going to read it again. Here's a Countess Bathory. This is her castle and her story. I knew about her story. I've read about her before, but just reading about the history of it chilled me to the bone. This painting down here, I don't know if you can see, apparently the painting is now lost, which is a shame, but wow, the painting itself just freaked me out. This is unbelievable. It gets into what vampirism was and still is, at least at the time of this writing, to the people, the native people in that region that are still wearing, at the time that this is written, traditional dress. Like they were very cut off from the rest of the world, and they really were still living as they had hundreds of years ago. And they were a very, superstitious. Of course, all of that stuff that you see in every Dracula movie is, they said it was true. They didn't want to talk about it. They would bless themselves when you mention it. It gets into the whole Orthodox Christianity that is so prevalent there. All of that stuff. It just is fascinating. And this, again, was a book that I found in an antique mart along with some of these other books. And I don't know, it cost maybe $6. Someone commented when I posted a picture of this book on Instagram that Anne Rice used this as a source book for her vampire books. I could definitely see that. And I think it was the same person had commented about what integrity this book has. And I love that word, and I think it applies to this book so beautifully because just the way it's written very intelligently from like a true historian perspective with a great style. And it made me realize I read so much, like especially when I'm doing research on like a vampire or something, which I've done sometimes. And, I'll go to like Wikipedia, and then it's just, the text is just so uninspiring. This is telling a story the way a good documentary tells a story. And speaking of documentaries, there is a companion documentary that goes with this book. I will link it below. I have a lot of links down there today relating to what I'm covering today, but I will link it below because it's definitely worth watching. It's narrated by Christopher Lee, and he is in it. They do some scenes from his movies, and it feels a little dated. Yes, it was done in the 70s, but it's great. And it gets into like a lot of the topics that are covered in this book, and the men who wrote this are involved in that documentary. So if you can't read the book, at least watch the documentary. But try to find this. If you are a Dracula vampire fan, you will get a lot out of this book. I'm sure it's out of print and maybe hard to find. I'm not sure. If you know this book, let me know in the comments below. If you have any information, or if you know of any other texts that are along this line, I would love to hear your thoughts about that. So please share. Okay, what else? Okay, so speaking of Code Red, I'm so grateful that I'm getting great reviews for this book. It has a 5-star rating on NetGalley. If you're part of NetGalley, you can download it for free. I've gotten great reviews on Goodreads as well, so I'm thrilled. And some very generous souls have made videos about Code Red. And David over at David's Book Reviews did a nice review recently, and I will link that below. I was really happy to see that. He's lovely. He's also doing a giveaway for Lurking in the Dark and Code Red. So I will list all of this below from David's channel, so please check it out and consider subbing if you can. I also wanted to mention that Code Red is a part of a free promo that's going on right now for BookFunnel. BookFunnel is a site where you can download free books in exchange for giving your email address, and then that's shared, and then you're added to email lists for people putting out newsletters and stuff. So you can get a free copy of Code Red and a bunch of other horror books that look really cool. I've been going through and checking them out and downloading some, but you have to put your email. So that's the catch. Not everyone likes to do that. I do have a newsletter that goes out like maybe 4 times a year because I'm really bad about doing it, but I will be doing one because when I release a new book, I do try to get a newsletter out. I'll link that as well. So I have tons of links down there, so you can get a free copy of Code Red if you want. Of course, I will be also doing a giveaway soon. Okay, so I mentioned that David is doing a giveaway for Lurking in the Dark. Well, Lurking in the Dark is finally now available for pre-order, just the ebook. A lot of people ask me about that every time I do a pre-order. Well, is it for the print book too? Unfortunately, Amazon doesn't do print pre-orders. However, the print book will be available on the same day that the ebook comes out, which is October 15th. So you can pre-order it now if you want, or wait until October 15th to get your ebook copy or your print copy. So yes, very excited about Lurking in the Dark coming out, and this will be the third HorrorTube anthology, and you can collect them all with great covers by Cameron Robeek. So that's exciting news. You'll be hearing more about that in the next couple of weeks. Mr. Morningstar, I love his channel. If you don't know it, it's a great horror channel. He's got this really cool vibe. He's one of the authors for Lurking in the Dark, and his story is amazing. It really is amazing. Really scary, really gory. He did a very cool video for Lurking in the Dark, and I'll post that below as well. I think that's it. I felt like I've made a lot of announcements about different things and a lot of links. So I'm going to end today's video with a tag video. I was tagged by Will, the Bald Book Geek, and I was really happy that he even knows I exist, because I have been a fan of Will's channel for years. He was one of the first BookTube channels I ever watched. He does mostly fantasy reviews and some YA, at least he used to. I'm not sure if he did. And he has some great rants, and I'll just leave it at that. I always enjoy his opinions, whether I agree or not. I love it when someone does a good rant. It's very entertaining. Okay, so this is called The Perfect Book Tag, and it was created by MJ at Reading This Life, inspired by a video by Criminali. It's called The Perfect Book. Now, it doesn't say this on the instructions, but after doing this, I think the idea is you find what you consider your perfect book, and then from your shelves or wherever, and then answer your questions according to how it matches up with your book. I think that's how it works. So here we go. Prompt number 1. So I got my book in my lap. I won't show it yet. So number 1, what format is your perfect book? Hardback, paperback, or e-format? Well, it's hardback. I always prefer a good hardback, preferably in leather. So now you know my kink. All right, number 2, how many pages is your perfect book? Okay, well, let me take a look. Okay, well, with the acknowledgments, this one comes out to 427 pages. Are you particular as to where the chapters begin? No, I don't really think so. I don't really think about that. I mean, maybe if the chapter started on the left side, that would bother me. I usually like the chapters, there to be a break and the chapters to begin on the right. Number 4, are you particular as to where the page numbers are located? No, I don't think I've ever thought about that, and I'm seeing that they're in the lower right-hand corner, which is fine. Favorite font. Do you check to see the font details if available? I probably have never checked to see what font something was. Some people might have a great knowledge of graphic design and they can tell you what font something is from looking at it. I am not that person. I always struggle with fonts a little bit when I'm doing something. Do margins matter to you? No, never really thought about it. Number 7, does your perfect book have any unique features that makes it perfect? If yes, please share. Yes, well, this book I love, and I've read it several times, and it does have some very important features, which include illustrations. I love illustrated book. And then number 8, show us the cover. What is perfect about it? Okay, so I think I understand this tag now, but I feel bad that I really can't talk too much about things like margins and fonts. But here's my perfect book. This is Dracula, speaking of Dracula, by Bram Stoker, of course, and this is called the Definitive Edition, illustrated by an artist I adore, Edward Gorey. So Edward Gorey, of course, designed the sets and costumes for the Broadway production of Dracula back in the 70s. It was a massive hit. In fact, well, I'll show you that in a minute. I have something that relates to that. So I've always loved Edward Gorey, and I've always loved Dracula. So the combination of the two is just delicious. Now, I did notice that the font, this is a Barnes & Noble book that came out in, I think I bought this in the 90s. Let me see. 96. I think this uses some of the Ogdred Weary font, which is the Edward Gorey font that he created or based on his handwritten font. This has a great introduction, and each chapter has this little bat with black, it has black type with red type accents. You know, I should really know my parts of the book, but I don't. When I was in school, in elementary school, we had a class in library science. I hope they still teach that to elementary school kids, but we had to memorize all the parts of the book, and except for maybe the spine, I don't really remember much, but we have these great illustrations of the characters in Dracula, Van Helsing, etc. But this is like a good book to read. It has a nice weight to it. I don't remember if it came with a dust jacket, but that's long gone. And it's a little worn out from reading. Now, this is not a leather cover. It is kind of like a canvas, but it's great. It's like tough enough to read and carry around with me, and where I'm not worried about messing it up, but it's also just, it's a good weight, it's a good size. It's the perfect book to read Dracula, which I'm actually currently rereading it, but I'm listening to the audiobook at the gym because I started working out again. So yeah, on the treadmill, I'm listening to Dracula. So I wanted to share, I know this video is getting a little long. So before this video is over, I wanted to share my Edward Gorey Dracula toy theater. So let's take a look. So this is actually Dracula, a cutout that, I guess I bought this at some point. So here is my Edward Gorey toy theater. I've had this for decades, and then I lost it, and I was devastated, and I was trying to buy a new one, and they were very expensive. And then, lo and behold, just recently I opened a drawer that I hadn't in a long time, which happens sometimes. It's kind of like something that would occur in a Edward Gorey story. You know, some Victorian lady opens a drawer and finds, you know, the black doll in it. So what this is you open it up, and then it's the set from Dracula that Gorey designed, and there are little pieces, so you can actually play with it. So and each piece corresponds to a different act in the play. So I will set that up and show it to you at the end of this video. So I'm going to tag 3 people for this tag. The first person is someone that really gets into the art of the book, and I think that she would be a great person to do this tag, and she gets into the tangible feelings of a book and all this type of thing, and that is Lydia over at Typical Books. I'd also like to tag someone who talks a lot about actual books, you know, physical books, and that's E.D. Lewis Reviews, and also Matt over at Paperback Junkie. I would love to see what they have to say about their perfect books. So let me know in the comments below if you have read or seen anything that I've mentioned in this video today, or if you have a perfect book that you'd like to share. I would love to hear your thoughts. So that's all I have for today. Thanks for stopping by my haunted library, and I'll see you soon. Bye!